Can we stump Dr. Tim Stratton? And that is the question before us today. He is going to answer all of your questions. Well, actually, just at least 13 of them. Please stay tuned for the whole video. Like this video, share it, and subscribe. If you've got a question, you can go to freethinkingministries.com/contact us. Type in a question. I do have one request, though. We don't need like an entire book for the question. Just as succinct as you can, type in the question. And we do these videos every once in a while. It's been, I don't know, like 5 months since we've done the last one. And as always, I have sifted through the questions. Tim has not seen the questions. Dr. Tim Stratton has not seen the questions. So this is a blind reaction. Tim, are you ready to go?
Let's do it.
All right. So we have multiple people that have watched the show that, in fact, we have a question from a different country even here today. So excited for that. The first one that we're going to get into here is, it's actually two questions, but they are along the same lines from two ladies, Daniela and Ariana. And they say, I'm going to read the first one, and then as you explain your answer, I might bring in the second one or not, but they're both very similar. It says, in free will, you believe we are the uncaused causers. Okay, let me pause there. Is that a fair way of saying that? Uncaused causers?
Depends on how that's defined. Obviously, we're caused to exist. I think it's better to say we act as unmoved movers because we're created in the image and likeness of God. So we would have that supernatural power to do that, where other things in the universe don't have that. And that's what allows us to be rational. But yeah, let's see how they flesh this out.
Okay. She says, I also do believe in this. However, I got an objection that has been driving me nuts. And it goes like this. Our nature causes our choice. Like we can't fly, but we can do things within those constraints. We are still caused because if you are prevented from choosing outside your nature, then you are caused to choose in that nature, meaning you are forced to choose one of those choices, therefore you are caused. And then she says, please, can you respond without a Frankfurt case? I just want a direct answer to this.
I love it. Yeah, okay, no Frankfurt cases will be appealed to. So back up, read that first part.
Yes. So basically what she is saying is our nature causes our choices.
Yeah,
like
that's false.
we can't fly,
false.
So we can't choose to fly.
Right. Yeah. You can't choose to fly, but that doesn't mean you can't choose to walk or run. Those things are both in your nature. So there are some things that we cannot choose, some things that are off limits. I can't choose to flap my wings and fly like a bird. No matter how badly I wanted to. I can try to do it, but it's not going to work. But I can choose if I'm going to sit down or stand up, if I'm going to walk, if I'm going to jog, if I'm going to run, if I'm going to sprint. I can do all of these things. So I can choose between those. So my nature allows me to choose between a range of alternative options, each of which are compatible with my nature. So that's what it means to have libertarian freedom.
Okay. Yeah. And so it seems to me that this question is basically is saying you would have to have all possibilities open to you for free will to exist. Like you could choose to be or do anything.
Well, God doesn't even have that. You know? I mean, God cannot choose to be a contingent being. Does that mean he doesn't have free will? No, he can choose to create the universe or not create it. But just because he can't choose to be a contingent being or choose to make the Godhead 4 persons instead of 3, he can't do that. So just because some things are not possible for God doesn't mean that he doesn't have libertarian freedom. So with God, God can do all things logically possible. Now for me, I would say flying is logically possible, but it's not scientifically possible. Same as walking on water. Walking on water is not scientifically possible, but it's obviously logically possible. But God, through his power, can do what we call miracles and then allow do things that are scientifically impossible. But he can only do that if they're logically possible. So it's logically possible for me to violate the laws of nature and walk on water if God uses his power to make that possible. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So the second question is very similar to this one, which is, and it kind of actually plays into exactly what you ended your most previous response with before I chimed in. So this is from Ariana. It says, "Hey, I stumbled through another problem." She says, "There was this thought experiment that I heard about where you imagine if there's a robot who could pick three options. Amongst him, the robot could pick different option every time. If you rewind it, the same exact robot again. So there's three options, and every time you rewind, the robot picks a different option. It can pick a different option. This shows that they make a choice even when being caused, and that they can choose any of these options, meaning that you can have a principle of alternative possibilities and still be determined." So have you heard of this case?
Something similar. But okay, so let me see if I get this right. On this thought experiment, there's a robot who has the opportunity to exercise an ability to choose between a range of three different alternative options, each of which are compatible with that robot's nature. Is that correct?
I would say it is actually programmed to choose.
Okay. Well, then that's not the case. Then it does not have an ability. If it's programmed, so if antecedent conditions are sufficient to necessitate how it chooses at time t, or t1, let's call time, t1, and then you rewind it and you hit that moment again, but now it's the second time, so we're going to call that t2. And now it's programmed to pick a different one. Okay, then it's still antecedent conditions sufficient to necessitate how the robot chooses. All right. And so really I would say the robot isn't doing the choosing, but the robot, if it experiences sensations, which I don't think is possible for robots to do, we would say at most, we are experiencing what looks like human choice through this deterministic setup. So bottom line, if at each time, right, the robot makes a choice, if there's three or even two possible alternative options available and consistent and compatible with the robot's nature at that time, then the robot has libertarian freedom, because that means that the antecedent conditions are not sufficient to necessitate the choice, that choice then is up to the robot, right? And I think that's metaphysically impossible. In fact, I've had long discussions with ChatGPT on this, and Chat would agree with me. So I think the question is based upon faulty metaphysics in the first place. So yeah, bottom line, if antecedent conditions are sufficient to necessitate the robot's choice, then it doesn't really have three options, each compatible with its nature at the moment of choice, right? But if one were to rewind it again, I would say that's metaphysically impossible, but let's have fun with a thought experiment, because they are my favorite kind of movies, time travel. You rewind it, and the robot is then programmed to do something different between those three options. That's not libertarian freedom. That's just determinism. It's determined to do something different each time. So it's not any kind of freedom worth wanting.
So it's like the illusion of the principle of alternative possibilities.
Yeah, definitely.
So she goes on to say, and this kind of is how you answered it, really, I think. It says, however, when I look at your articles called Defining Libertarian Freedom, where you respond to someone named Scott, you denied PAP, of compatibilism and determinism in your 6th paragraph. However, the problem is, if this was true about the robot, how can we say we are free to choose within our nature? If one can say the same thing about the robot, considering that a robot is making choices to choose, but is caused. But I think you just answered that.
Okay.
Would we?
Yeah, I think she's referring to article I wrote years ago. And so I leave all my old articles up because I like to have people see my progress that I've gone through over the last decade. And I think people will find that I'm far more philosophically precise these days in my writings. And so I don't know exactly everything I said back. But I do think I remember the article she's referring to, since she mentioned Scott. I think I remember that conversation. But just really quickly for everybody watching, compatibilism is the thesis that some kind of freedom, not libertarian freedom, but some other kind of freedom and or moral responsibility is compatible with determinism. So that's what compatibilistic freedom is. If somebody's got some kind of freedom other than libertarian freedom and is also determined, then we would say that they are free in a compatibilistic sense. And that just means, hey, now let's look at the robot, for example. If the robot is programmed to want or desire, I don't think robots have wants and desires, but programmed we'll just say if a robot is programmed to do X in C and nothing prevents the robot from doing X in C, then you could say the robot's got compatibilistic freedom. Is that a kind of freedom worth having? Definitely not when it comes to morality, and especially not when it comes to rationality. After all, if you pick your beliefs, if you choose your beliefs based upon your greatest desires, that's a big problem. As Ben Shapiro likes to say, facts don't care about your feelings. So anyway, she mentioned compatibilism in there. I wanted to just explain what that is really quickly. Yeah. So I don't know, did I answer her question sufficiently or not?
Yeah, I think so. So she compounds that with this next. She says, let me see. Okay. She says, I was faced with another objection where, like, our nature limits our choices. Therefore, your nature makes us or causes us or even forces us to choose in that range of options. How do I avoid saying the nature causes our choices despite the constraints of having to choose in this range? I couldn't really understand when you answered my last question about the preventing thing, so I tried to rephrase it better. If you don't understand, you can reach out to me, she says. So does that make sense?
This is Ariana?
Yeah, we've addressed her multiple times.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Not Ariana Grande.
I hope, well, maybe. I don't know. I don't think so. No.
Where's she from? She's from out of the country? Is that what you said?
No, Daniela was from out of the country.
Okay.
Ariana is not. I think she's a student in her 20s. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. So, so my nature, the fact that I'm human, does limit my choice options. I don't have the same choices available to me as God does, for example. I don't have the power to create universes, as an example. So yeah, and I don't have the power to fly like a bird. I don't have the power to breathe underwater like a fish. Some choices are just not available to me. That doesn't mean I don't have another range of options, even a limited one. God can't do all things, right? I mean, he can't do the logically impossible. And so just because he can't do the logically impossible doesn't mean he can't do everything logically possible, which is how we define omnipotence. But yeah, just because I can't do all things, just because I can't do the scientifically impossible doesn't mean I don't have an opportunity to exercise an ability to choose between a limited range of options that are scientifically possible within my human nature. And again, I think if we don't have that when it comes to deliberation and rationality, especially regarding metaphysics and theology, then we can't possess knowledge of metaphysics and theology, and we've discussed that at length.
Yes.
So yeah, for people want to know more, go to my co-authored article with JP Moreland.
That'd be something. You should do a co-author article with James White. That would be.
Yeah. We'll see if he's interested.
Yeah. Okay. Next question is from Tahra. I hope I said that now, or Tahra. I don't know. It's Tahra. Tahra or Tahra. Tahra.
Tahra sounds awesome.
That's what I think too. But so this is kind of it's more of a personal question. So we're kind of moving back and forth, philosophical and personal. She says, I was raised in the Christian faith, and I feel my belief/faith is real. My husband, my best friend of 10 years, does not. Evolution, science, etc. And I know you have something to say about that, so hold on just a second. The last 2 years have been very challenging. He was diagnosed with breast cancer, and we almost lost him. I felt the Spirit when I was praying on my knees in the chapel in the hospital, a true miracle. We are 38 and 40 and are beyond ready to have a family. He is 100% okay with kids going to church with us every week and making their personal decisions as they mature. But I want and need him to feel the same way that I do. His questions, much like my brother's, are incredibly hard to answer. So she has a skeptic brother too. So he's a skeptic. So I think it's one of those things like, how do I navigate wanting my husband to feel the same way about my faith as I do?
Well, she can't force him to feel a certain way or to believe a certain way. But did I hear right that he's cool with going to church together as a family and stuff like that?
Yeah, he's at least cool with the kids going to church.
So that's a huge plus, pro right now. And if I were her, I would encourage him to go on Sundays, even if he isn't feeling himself believing with over 50% certainty. In fact, I know people who have gone to church being quite skeptical, saying they don't have 50% certainty, let alone 51% certainty, that Christianity is true. One guy I know is one of the smartest people I've ever met. Set the record on the MCATs in Nebraska, and told me that he was going to church and he probably had a 15% certainty that Christianity was true or something like that. I mean, way low. But he kept going anyway. And I said, well, why are you going? And he goes, because it's the best of a bad lot, basically. He's like, there's if atheism's true, life is meaningless. If Islam's true, huge problems. I mean, he's going through and it's like, even though I don't, he said, even though I don't think Christianity is probably true, it's the best of a bad lot. And he said, given the evidence for it, although it was not enough to convince him, he probably wasn't saying it was 15%. I think he was saying he maybe had 30% or something like that, something a little higher. But he said all the arguments for God's existence and the argument for the historical resurrection, even though he said it wasn't enough for him to push him above 50%. He said it got him at least a higher percentage than all the other options. He said it made more sense than atheism, made more sense than Islam, made more sense than Judaism, and went down the line. And so he said it was the best of a bad lot. Now, that was probably 10 years ago. And I believe if you talk to him today, he would say that he has over 50% certainty that Christianity is true, and he's living accordingly. He actually believes it. And so I would encourage Tahra to lovingly encourage her husband to join and say, hey, even if you don't believe, please come with us as a family so we can do this as a family to strengthen our family. Now, with that said, you can't force belief upon him. So she's got to be respectful, patient, and loving, and also intellectual and rational. So I would, if evolution is the reason why he's not a believer, it's a horrible reason to reject the existence of God and the truth of Christianity. Really, the only thing evolution could do is to get one to be skeptical of a certain interpretation of the creation account in Genesis. And you have several interpretations available, each consistent and compatible with even conservative Christianity. evangelical Christianity. So all evolution does is, if one believes evolution is true, is it takes away a certain interpretation of the creation account in Genesis, period. Right? It does nothing to show that God doesn't exist. It does nothing to show that the historical resurrection of Jesus wasn't true. So it's just a really bad reason. In fact, I could connect him to the evolutionary biologist here at the University of Nebraska, who in the last decade did become a Christian. She left atheism. She's got an article on my website, on our website, freethinkingministries.com. I think it's called Evidence in the Flesh for Apologetics. And she talks about how, as a PhD evolutionary biologist, she finally came to believe with 51% certainty or something, some number like that, that God exists and God raised Jesus from the dead. So yeah, interact with his reasons for being skeptical. Maybe it's, why would God allow all this pain, evil, and suffering to happen? Why would God allow cancer, things like that? Well, guess what? We also, I've spilled tons of ink answering those questions. And, ultimately, Paul answers that in 2 Corinthians 4:17, when he says, these light momentary afflictions prepare us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison. And these light momentary afflictions eventually killed Paul, right? So Jesus even makes it clear that in this world we will have trouble. So this stuff shouldn't take us by surprise. We should expect it. But we know that God is using all of this to make us stronger, to prepare us for a much better place. And I've got a whole article on this, or not an article, a whole chapter on this in the book called Faith Examined. It's a book dedicated to Frank Turek. And I just want to point Tahra to this book, Faith Examined, edited by Clark Bates, multiple contributors in it. And my chapter is about pain, evil, and suffering, and why a perfectly good, perfectly intelligent, perfectly loving, and perfectly powerful, maximally great being would allow us to experience all kinds of pain, evil, and suffering. So just want to really encourage Tahra, whoever you are, to love your husband, love God, and gently reason with him, to come to church with you, even if he doesn't think it's true or believe it's probably true, just for the sake of the family, number one. But number two, continue to have intellectual and rational conversations with him, lovingly trying to bring him across the 50% line into believing that Christianity is true.
That's good. And if I'd add one more pastoral kind of thing to that as well, just hit the knees in prayer like you did when he had cancer. You hit the knees in prayer. God did a miracle in his life to save him. You can hit your knees in prayer, and we believe that prayer is powerful and effective. So keep praying for him. And then I don't know what your relationship is like with your husband, if he likes having those sorts of deep conversations with you about intellectual things, or if you freeze up. I know, like, if it were my wife and I, we're not debating about that stuff. She just kind of freezes up. It's not that she's not intelligent. It's just hard for us to have those conversations. So it's also gauging your relationship so that when you have those faith conversations, it doesn't feel like you're quote unquote nagging or whatever. You don't want it to associate with that, but saying, hey, remember, this is kind of our bargain. This is our deal. We're going to go to church together. If ever you want to have a conversation, just know I'm praying for you. I want to always have these conversations with you. I'm not going to keep bludgeoning you with it, because I think maybe you might want to be like, you need to feel this way, or marriage will be so much better if you and take it from a man. Like, if your wife is saying those things, sometimes that alone starts to be the resistance. I don't know if Tim would back me up there. Sometimes as men, we can tend to have a visceral reaction to that sort of thing. And then if you feel unequipped to answer the questions, find places. You found FreeThinking Ministries, you found other places to say, hey, have you considered this? Have you considered reading Stephen Meyer's book, Return of the God Hypothesis? Have you considered reading something from Hugh Ross or something from William Lane Craig? So finding those resources to point him to as well, so you're not the one that has to answer the question. So that would be something that I would add.
I would suggest that if her husband really does believe that evolution is true, she should not try to change his mind on evolution. She should try to show him how evolution is compatible with Christianity and even with Genesis. So I would point him to the recent work of William Lane Craig and Joshua Swamidass and Andrew Loke. Even in my work, I talk about this in the last chapter of my book, Human Freedom, Divine Knowledge, and Mere Molinism. I take a view very similar to Andrew Loke's, and he and I both came to the same conclusion and the same model independently of one another. He developed it in much more depth and detail. I think I actually published it first, but he's much more well known for the view and has defended it in academic settings. And in fact, I just had him kind of peer review the second edition of my book, where I get into this topic in much more detail. And he gave me the thumbs up and endorsed my book as well.
Awesome.
So, yeah. So, don't try to argue. I think Christians just do themselves a tremendous disservice. Hey, if somebody believes the earth is old and you believe the earth is young, let them have it, because that's not a salvation issue, right? Let them have it, right? Josh, am I right? You kind of lean towards young earth, right?
I'm probably leaning towards old earth.
Are you? Okay.
Yeah. I tell people I coin flip back and forth.
Okay.
Depending on what I read. Stephen Meyer's kind of convinced me. He's kind of an old earth guy. He's kind of I would say 52%. Like you said, I don't, sometimes we argue over these. I think they're interesting debates, interfaith debates that we can have, but those are not things to argue with the non-believer about.
Of theistic evolution, because it's quite compatible with Molinism, which everybody knows I advance. That doesn't mean
no way.
that doesn't mean that I affirm evolution or theistic evolution. I just say it's sure possible. And if, to the person who says if evolution is true, then Christianity is false, and if Christianity is true, then evolution's false, I'll say that is a false dichotomy here. That's just not true. Christianity and evolution can both be true. I've seen the models. I've developed a model, and look, just because I've developed a model doesn't mean that I affirm it's true. But I do affirm, based on this model, that it's possibly true. And so when somebody says, well, do you think we evolved from a single-celled common ancestor? I say, well, if we did, it was intentionally designed and guided by God. He was the engineer behind all of that, and that's easy for a God with middle knowledge to do. But I'm agnostic. I don't know. I'm just willing to follow the scientific evidence wherever it goes here. And I see multiple competing models that are out there. You mentioned some of them: Hugh Ross, Stephen Meyer. Then you got William Lane Craig, Joshua Swamidass, Andrew Loke, and myself. Different models. I keep them all on the table. I even keep young earth creationism on the table. It's still a possibility. I haven't ruled it out, right? I think it's probably false, but I haven't ruled it out. And so I keep it on the table along with all the others. And I say, let's just go where the evidence goes, because they're all compatible with handling God's word responsibly.
Yeah. And this is the last thing I'll say, and then we'll move on. And the mistake is making the Bible say something that the Bible isn't even trying to say. And I think that's the big mistake that some Christians make in those situations. All right. So hopefully that answers your question, Tahra or Tahra, however you say. I think I'm going to go Tahra because I like it.
Let us know. Let us know how to pronounce your name.
Yes. This next one is from Russ. Russ says, I heard you on a recent Provisionist Perspective video talking about an academic journal article you just finished, I think called Is Divine Determinism a Different Gospel? You were talking about how, although Calvinism is a different gospel, it is not so different as to make one accursed. I would very much like to get a copy of that article. Do you know how soon and where it will be available? much appreciated. This is just a shameless plug question. We did not pay Russ to send this question in. But
was that my dad? My dad's name is Russ. So I'm like,
that's funny.
Yeah.
No, I do know the last name of this person, and it is not Stratton. So unless he did a pseudonym, but I don't think he did.
No. So the article isn't in print yet, but it looks like it. I believe it's getting picked up here shortly. But I will be presenting this paper along with my co-author Phil Kahlberg. We'll be presenting this paper at the EPS in Boston this November. So Russ, if you can make it to Boston, make sure you come listen. But yeah, I do plan on getting this out there in the near future. Just, it just takes a while to get work officially published. I've had one that happened pretty quickly. That was one I co-authored with JP Moreland, but it was still not as quickly as I was hoping. I've had another one that took 1.5 years to get it published. And that's just the hard part about doing academic stuff. And many times, so I'm just like, I can write this and get it on my blog on the website tomorrow. Where, man, if I want to get this in the academic literature, maybe I can get it done in 2 years. It's just really frustrating. But yeah, I'm not going to give up on this. Phil Kahlberg and I have put a lot of work into this, and we are committed to getting it published for everybody to scrutinize. So yeah, stay tuned. I've kind of been pulled into the open theist waters lately. That is by the open theists wanting to debate Molinism and middle knowledge and all of that. My passion is not to debate open theists. I see open theists as kind of like my theological allies because we're so committed to libertarian freedom and see the horrible problems that come along with exhaustive divine determinism and Calvinism. And so I've even kind of let some of my open theist friends know, I don't know, a year or so ago, I said, hey, look, I'm not interested in debating you guys right now. I see us as allies. And while I don't think that open theism is true, I haven't ruled it out completely. I keep it on the table. I have ruled out Ed Calvinism completely. That's not on the table anymore. But I keep open theism, or at least nuanced versions of it, on the table as fallback options should Molinism ever fail. But the more I defend Molinism, the stronger it seems to get. So I don't see that happening. But anyway, I've told my open theist friends and colleagues, I'm like, hey, I'm not interested in having this conversation. Well, some of them have taken it upon themselves to say, too bad, we want to have these friendly sparring matches now. And I'm like, all right, I'll take a little break to do this. So that's what I'm discussing a lot right now. But I am hoping, here's my point, I'm hoping to get back to the problems with Ed Calvinism very soon. I'm sure all my Ed Calvinist friends are very happy with my open theist friends for distracting me from what I believe is my primary calling right now, is to show why determinism's false. But I plan on getting back to that soon, and definitely we'll be discussing it in Boston this November.
Okay. Yeah. So come to Boston November 18th through the 20th, I believe. And you'll be able to hear it. You might be the first to hear it, actually, if you come there, if it's not published in a journal yet. So do that. All right. This next one is all the way from a place called Pakistan.
Nice.
Pakistan, yeah. I don't know if this is this person's real name, but it says Oyster from Pakistan. That's awesome. And he says this, and the reason I say I don't know if it's his real name, it could be possible that he's using a pseudonym because he's from Pakistan and doesn't want his real name out there.
Yeah. I know. So I do have a good friend from Pakistan, but I doubt this is him.
Probably not. So he says, dear brethren, maybe they found us because of him.
Yeah.
He says, dear brethren, greetings in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. I am Oyster from Pakistan. humbly serving God by running a small independent Sunday school in a village. This effort is not affiliated with any church or ministry, but is driven by my heartfelt desire to share God's love and word with the children in my community, which is awesome. Praise God.
Mm-hmm. That is awesome, Oyster.
Yeah, be in prayer for him.
We're rooting for you, man. I mean, what you're doing is, in my opinion, so much better than what Josh and I could ever do.
Yeah.
I mean, you are the true hero here, and we look up to you. And man, just we're praying for you. Keep up the great work.
Keep up the great work, and may God protect you. That is what I'd say. So here's his question, though. He says, "What is the biblical explanation of the Godhead, the Trinity, and how does it describe the relationship and unity among the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit in Christ's service?" Oyster. And before you answer, Tim, I think this is an important question from Pakistan, because often the Trinity, the Godhead, is denigrated by Muslims in our conversation. So I'm guessing that in his Sunday school, it's important to have kind of a robust explanation of the Trinity. So anyway, how would you respond to the question?
So first of all, when we're explaining the Trinity, it's helpful to not use analogies that ultimately fall apart, that we would say are heretical because they are too disanalogous, I guess. There's no perfect analogy. So if you're going to give an analogy, you can say, look, there's no perfect analogy, but like St. Patrick, why we have 3-leaf clovers on St. Patrick's Day is because he used that. Like, look, is this 1 leaf or is it 3 leaves? I'm like, well, it's 1 leaf because it's got 1 stem. But it's a 3-leaf clover. Okay, I guess it's 3 leaves. But there's only 1 stem. Oh, I guess it's it's ultimately not going to work.
Hey, that's partialism, Patrick.
That's right. But what and what I hear quite often when I go to Utah and I have interactions with Mormons, they'll do the same things that Muslims do, and they'll say, "Look, the Trinity is just logically incoherent." You see, because you say you worship 1 God and 3 gods, or you worship 1 person and 3 persons, and I say, hold up, that's not true. You're attacking a straw man. What we do is we worship 1 what and 3 whos, right? So if you say we worship 1 what and 3 whos, there's no contradiction there. So we worship 1 substance, 1 immaterial substance that has 3 sets of cognitive faculties. I like to say it this way. I am a soul that has a body. When I as a soul am separated from my body, there will be an immaterial substance I call a soul and a corpse. And that immaterial substance, referred to as a soul, has 1 set of cognitive faculties. I'll say that God is 1 immaterial substance with 3 sets of cognitive faculties. If you can be 1 immaterial substance with 1 set of cognitive faculties, why can't God, a maximally great being, be 1 immaterial substance with 3 sets of cognitive faculties? Now, if you're having a hard time wrapping your mind around that, consider the 3-headed dog of mythology named Kerberos. He's a guard dog who guards the gates of Hades or something like that. Now imagine that Hercules and Kerberos are in a fight, and Hercules draws his sword and stabs Kerberos in the heart, killing Kerberos. And now the soul of Kerberos survives the death of his body. But it was 1 dog with 3 sets of cognitive faculties, each of which could say, I think X, right? Or I think A, I think B, I think C, right? Now you've got 1 immaterial substance that survives the death of the dog's body, but that 1 immaterial substance has 3 sets of cognitive faculties. If you can conceive of that, you've just conceived of something extremely similar to the Trinity, and you can see that it's not a logical incoherence. So that's how I like to describe the Trinity. I don't think it's that big of a deal anymore. A lot of people are like, the Trinity is just a mystery that we cannot fathom. I'm like, well, speak for yourself. I think I have a pretty good understanding, and I see that it's not logically incoherent. Is it mysterious? Yes. Is it a contradiction? No. So just make sure you don't affirm two contradictory claims. And the easy way to do that is to say that we worship one what and three whos. That's how I start.
That's good. That's good. And I would add to that just that the relationship to each other, they're co-equal, but they have their own roles, right? So they have their own roles. Now, the Eastern Church and the Western Church are going to differ on the Holy Spirit proceeding either just from the Son or from the Son and the Father. That's a small difference, in my opinion. I know it wasn't small in 1054.
And there's even other factions that would disagree and say, there's no really proceedings in the sense that one is contingent upon the other. But I am certainly open to these conversations. Some would say that the Father is the only necessary being, and the Son and the Son and Spirit are contingent upon the Father, but are not. I think this is right, so people can correct me if I'm wrong. Saying something like this, that they are necessarily contingent. So just as if H2O was necessary without beginning, then although wetness is contingent upon H2O, wetness would never begin to exist and is necessarily contingent. I might be getting that wrong, but I've heard philosophers arguing over this. I'm kind of partial to the view that each person of the Trinity is necessary, but hey, as long as we get three persons who have no beginning, that's what's most important. That they aren't created beings in the sense that they weren't there and then they were. As long as you have three eternal without beginning persons and one substance, I think that's I'm not going to call that person a heretic. And if another person says no, each of the three persons in the one substance exists necessarily, and that they are not. There's not this contingent chain. I'm not going to call that person a heretic. I think we all agree. Hey, we've got a Trinity here. What would you add to that, Josh? I might be getting some of that wrong. So.
No, I think. And I think possibly the question is also like biblically, what are their different roles? And it's clear that they have different roles. Everyone that is a Trinitarian would agree with that. The Father seems to be sovereign over the plan. The Son is submissive to the Father in his plan. Jesus says, "Not my will, but your will be done on earth." Right? And so, and then the Holy Spirit encourages, enlightens, illuminates those sorts of things, Scripture and each other, and convicts. So they have different roles, but they all work in community with one another. In fact, our friend Adam Johnson wrote a book called Divine Love Theory. And so if you want to get a pretty good grasp, I think it's a really good book. I was able to read it. It was good. And it's a little bit different because it's philosophical. It's kind of like divine command theory where we get morality from. So it's not necessarily looking at the ontology of God, but it helps to elucidate some of those things, in my opinion.
Fantastic book.
Yeah. So we'll plug that. But then the last thing I would say is if you're in Pakistan and you are dealing with Muslims, they get the Trinity wrong. They in the Quran, the Trinity is the Father, Jesus, and Mary. That's what Muhammad thought the Trinity was. And so we first need to disabuse them of that notion. Say, oh, if that's what the Trinity was, I would agree. It's logically incoherent. That doesn't work because that's three different. That's three different essences. But we have three persons, one essence. So I think we've kind of answered that question. Any closing remarks there?
Oh, I don't think so. Just want to encourage Oyster in Pakistan, and man, just keep up the great work and keep us posted. Please keep sending us questions and let us know how ministry is going there. Absolutely. I also have some other friends in Pakistan who are doing ministry, who were born and raised there. So maybe I can introduce you guys, and you guys can team up or something.
Yes, if you're not introduced already, hopefully you are, because community is huge when you are in that sort of situation. All right, this next question is from John. Now, John has asked this question multiple times, and so I'm going to ask the question. I think it's going to be pretty quick because I actually also have an answer because I emailed a friend of ours on this question. So John asked if we are familiar with somebody named Jonathan M.S. Pierce, who wrote a book on the resurrection, and some atheists seem to claim that it's the strongest refutation of the resurrection out there. So he's wondering if we knew his arguments. It's called the Resurrection, a critical examination of the Easter story. And he wanted our take on it. So first, the question for you, Tim, and then I'm going to answer the other question. But the question for you, Tim, is, have you heard of this person and their work? Jonathan M.S. Pierce, The Resurrection, a critical examination of the Easter story.
I don't think I have. I may have heard his name tossed around here and there, but I've definitely not read his work. So I don't even know what the argument is. So
okay, same here. And I bet you can guess who I emailed about this question.
Would that be a certain Mike Licona?
Yes, I emailed Dr. Mike Licona. He was kind enough to get back to me, and he said that he was not aware of Jonathan Pierce either and hadn't read the book, but he did note that when he looked at the credentials, it did not seem as Jonathan Pierce was a recognized scholar in the area of resurrection studies, even skeptic resurrection studies. And he says, of course, that doesn't mean his argument is not good, but it just means he has not been engaged with by scholars on the issue. So perhaps they're lay atheists. It's a self-published book, which might be one of the reasons we haven't heard of it either. And it's not that sometimes you got to self-publish a book. I get that. And sometimes self-published books can be good. I self-published a novel, and it's probably bad, but I self-published a novel. So self-publishing isn't always bad, but if you want to be taken seriously in the scholarly fields, probably not going to interact with very many.
Publishing a fictional novel is on a completely different playing field than publishing what's supposed to, if you want to be taken seriously by academics, if your arguments are good, they're going to make waves and somebody's going to pick you up. I mean, so it doesn't mean his arguments are false. We're not saying that. Like Mike said, just because you publish, you self-publish, doesn't mean your arguments are false. That would be a logical fallacy. But it should get your attention. Red flags are raised right away. And for me, I mean, gosh, I have so many people trying to take down my work and blogs and on Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that. I'm like, look, you only have so much time to study views that oppose your own. And I choose to study what's in the academic literature, or if it's going to be blogs that are written by fellow academics. That's where I'm going to start. And if something's good enough, if it starts making enough waves where it's getting people's attention, I'm like, all right, then I'll look at that. But until that happens, that guy's got some more work to do.
Yep. So it's not that we wouldn't take his argument seriously, but it just seems like scholars haven't interacted with it either because he's self-published and not a recognized scholar on the topic. And that's from Dr. Mike Licona. So thank you, Dr. Licona, if you're watching this, for responding to my email. All right. Colin writes that he's been trying to wrap his head around Molinism on and off for quite some time. And there's an objection that he thinks is related to the grounding objection, but no response that he's seen has been satisfactory. Or he says, or the concepts being used in the response are just more advanced than where I'm at, and that's a distinct possibility. Fair enough. That's good epistemic humility there, Colin. So he says that it doesn't seem to me that the principle of alternate possibilities is compatible with counterfactuals of creaturely freedom, having set truth values. For instance, if you have proposition P, agent A would do action X in situation S, and P is a true counterfactual, then it seems to me that there are no alternate possibilities that are actually available to A and S other than X, because there is no sense in which A actually could have done Y, and S. So maybe it's logically impossible, but it's not metaphysically possible given the truth of P. And I don't really know what it would mean for the principle of alternative possibilities to meaningfully give you libertarian freedom if only logical possibility is in view and not metaphysical possibility. Okay. Did you follow all of that?
I think so.
Okay.
So first of all, what's this guy's name? This is Colin?
Colin, yeah.
Okay, Colin. Check out freethinkingministries.com because my last several articles have been addressing this issue and others raised by people in the open theist camp, as I alluded to earlier. And I do discuss this issue. So just in a nutshell, though, for right now, the counterfactuals of creaturely freedom, these reflect free choices and indeterministic settings and circumstances. They don't cause them. First of all, if these things actually existed, like in an abstract sense, as abstract objects, well, abstracta don't causally determine things. They are causally effete. They don't make things happen. But that's not what we're talking about, though. Even these CCFs are reflections, not antecedent conditions sufficient to necessitate. So it reflects what the free agent would do in a non-deterministic circumstance. So, as I describe in my book, we'll say that God knows that Sally would freely do X instead of not X if placed in freedom permitting circumstance C. Right? So God knows that's what would freely happen if he creates that non-deterministic circumstance. Then God creates that circumstance and places Sally in. Now, here's the proposition. God knows that Sally will freely choose X instead of non-X in this freedom permitting circumstance C. All that changed there was Sally would freely choose to Sally will freely choose. So would transforms to will, but freely doesn't magically disappear. So that's just, a very quick introduction to that, but I get into the deep philosophical weeds, and just some of my recent articles on this. So I want to encourage him, Colin, to spend some time with this. Did I answer, you think, enough, or
yeah, I think one of the other ideas is that, at least the way he phrased the question, it seems like his thought is principle of alternative. I can't ever say it. Principle of alternative possibilities needs to exist for libertarian free will to exist.
That's false,
and that's not necessarily true.
Yeah. I think we have a principle of alternative possibilities, but at minimum, what we need is being the source of our thoughts and actions. Mm-hmm. So I like to say it this way: God doesn't have the ability to be anything but loving. God loves all of his creatures, contra some Calvinists. God loves all of his creatures and desires everybody to be saved, 1 Timothy 2:4. And so I would argue that God does not have the power to do otherwise and be unloving or to not love somebody. However, there is nothing outside of God that determines him to be loving. He is the source of his love and all love. So I say that God has sourcehood libertarian freedom when it comes to love, even though it's impossible for him to do otherwise and not love. So if I can make sense of it that way, maybe there's some situations like that for humanity. But that's what's most important, is, are we the source of our thoughts, mental actions, and physical actions? Even occasionally, if we ever are, then we've got libertarian freedom, even if we couldn't do otherwise for some weird reason. But with that said, if you can show that we have libertarian freedom in the sense that we have the ability to choose or to choose otherwise, if that's ever the case, then you had sourcehood freedom there. So you can use the principle of alternative possibilities to prove sourcehood. but you can't always use sourcehood to prove alternative possibilities. But I do think sourcehood heavily implies alternative possibilities, but that's a longer conversation.
All right. That's good. All right. We got a few more questions, but before we do that, please like this video, share it, and subscribe. If you have a question, go to freethinkingministries.com/contact us, and we would love to answer your question as long as it is sufficiently short and communicated well in our ability to do so. Also, we are only able to do this because of generous gifts from people who watch this channel, consume the content, invite us as speakers to come out. If you want to invite Tim or I as a speaker to come out, we'd love to do that for you. So you can go to that contact us page and even ask what it would take to get us to come out and share some of these thoughts on maybe it's Calvinism, maybe it's determinism, maybe it's cultural issues. I don't know. We have all of that on our YouTube channel. You can surf and look at all of our videos on all of those topics as well. So please do that. Again, freethinkingministries.com/contact us. And if you want to join the team, freethinkingministries.com/donate. That will be in the description. So let's move on to the next question. The next question is from Jeffery. And first, Jeffery would like to say thank you so much for your ministry. You have helped me so much. So thank you, Jeffery, for that kind remark. He says, I wanted to know if you have ever heard from a Calvinist the argument that there is no absolute evil in the universe because God determines it all and makes sure it ultimately works out for good.
Well, I don't know if I've ever heard that, but I've argued it, that if God determines everything, that sin really becomes hard to make sense of. In fact, it seems illusory to say that we sin, because the definition of sin is missing the mark. But if God determines all things, all of your thoughts, all of your beliefs, all of your physical actions, if God determines all of it, then you never miss the mark. You do exactly what God made you do. And so if that's the case, there is no evil in the universe, at least in the sense of being other than the way things ought to be. So yeah, I'd make that case.
Yeah. So what would you say to a Calvinist that makes that case, though?
Obviously, evil exists.
Yeah. Fair enough. All right. Yeah. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah.
Okay. Eric is next. He says, hey, Freethinking Ministries team, I have a question for you. Are there any Bibles on the market that have Molinist notes in them? For example, I have a MacArthur Study Bible, which is really great, except I don't agree with him on matters of predestination and other Calvinist-specific viewpoints, especially after reading through Tim's Mere Molinism book. I don't think such an undertaking has been made, however. Curious if that's something you all have come across. Thanks for the email articles, by the way. They're awesome to read through and love the podcasts. So thank you, Eric.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. And your words are very encouraging. Thank you. But no, there's no Molinist Study Bible that I'm aware of. However, there's been some of us talking about the possibility of doing that in the future, but it's not in any immediate plans. But I've talked with Kirk McGregor and some others about maybe doing this in the future. So we'll see.
That'd be good. And yours truly will be working on something that could really be useful for that.
That's right. Josh, maybe you and I just need to tackle this. When you're done with your PhD, maybe that's something we go after.
Maybe you and I will. Yeah, I think I want more than a team of two doing an entire
definitely,
study.
But we could be the
instigators.
The instigators, be the editors of it, and get others like McGregor and Craig and the other leading Tyson James and Randy Everest and other Molinists out there to contribute little articles here and there and to help us. Yeah, that'd be really cool.
It'd be good, and it's kind of a shame because there are some, a lot of our translations are good, and we'll get another question later that has to do with translations. But there are some translations that kind of have a Calvinist bent towards them. ESV is one of them. There are some translation decisions that the ESV makes that I go, you're making this specifically. You chose this word specifically to, and I actually had a conversation with someone about that on Twitter, or X just recently as well. So,
I've heard the ES. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I use the NASB 1995 edition or the NET. It seems to be the most neutral to me.
I've heard that I've heard people refer to the ESV as the Calvinist interpretation or the Calvinist version. That's why I actually use it as my primary study Bible. Because if I can use the ESV to show that Calvinism's false, then that's, all the better for me. But I think the ESV is a pretty accurate translation. Tries to go word for word.
It's not bad. It's not bad. It just makes some choices. Well, and what you're saying reminds me of, I'm writing this book review, and it's always nice when you can use words inside the book to refute what the book is arguing. So it's always nice. Mm-hmm. Not that the Bible is arguing for something, but anyway, something different. All right. Are we ready to move on? Sorry, I cut you off there.
Okay. Sorry.
All right. Jeff says this. He says, Hi, Jeff. Hey, Jeff. I have a basic question about Molinism in light of 1 Timothy 2:3-4. So it says, this is good and pleases God our Savior, who wants all people to be saved and to come to a knowledge of the truth.
Yeah, I just mentioned that verse.
Yes, you did. Why doesn't God only create people who would freely choose to accept him in the actual world? It seems as though if God can create some of those people, he can and would create only those people. That is, he could and would create only people with whatever personality characteristics, etc., that are required to freely choose Christ in the actual world, which personality characteristics, etc., he would know due to his middle knowledge.
Mm-hmm. First of all, that question assumes a creationism view of the soul instead of a traducianist view. I actually lean toward the traducian view, and so the question would just be answered very easily from that position, and that is, so for example, several years ago, back in my youth pastor days, I was leading an apologetics Bible study before school for young men to attend. So we'd go to the coffee shop, get breakfast, and study apologetics for an hour before, once a week before these boys went to high school. And this atheist in high school started coming, who all these boys were friends with. His name was Sam. And so this atheist was coming, and he said he just wanted to come to argue and to show why we were all wrong. I'm telling you, I think it was 2 to 3 weeks in, he gave his life to Christ. Now, which is really cool. Wound up doing his wedding. So cool. But here's the deal. Sam was raised in an atheist home by atheist parents, who, by the way, are still devout atheists. But Sam would have never come into existence if it weren't for his atheist parents. So let's say his parents reject Christ eternally, right? Well, the only way for Sam to come into existence is if his atheist parents met each other. So God can't even have Sam in existence to save if his non-saved parents don't exist. Now, if the creation view of the soul is true, I suppose you could get around that and say, well, no, God could have created Sam and put his soul in some other body, but I just don't think it works that way. Also, we can look at just my story. My grandma and grandpa had a huge role in my introduction to Jesus and my walk with Christ. My grandma and grandpa obviously had a huge role in my mom coming to Christ. The way I understand it is my grandpa gave his life to Christ during World War II, or at least really made a commitment, which you hear that quite often in the atheists and foxholes and things like that. So my grandpa committed his life to Christ during World War II. And a God of middle knowledge knows that perhaps my grandpa wouldn't have done that unless World War II was a real event in history. Well, what do you need for World War II? You need Hitler. Why would God create Hitler? Well, because God knew that if Hitler exists, then my grandpa would give his life to Christ. That would eventually lead to me becoming a Christian, going into ministry. And I just can't tell you, I don't know how many people I've led to Christ, let alone baptized. I really can't count. Literally lost track years ago. So now you think of each of them and how, let's just suppose that each of them lead 10 people to Christ. And then each of those people lead another 10 people to Christ. Well, I mean, just look, we're only going back less than a century ago to get to one guy. Why would God create Hitler? Well, again, this gets back to, ultimately, we can go back to Doctor Strange and the Avengers movies to see how all these things, God picks the best. I believe God picks the best feasible freedom creating, or the best feasible freedom permitting world in which evil is ultimately defeated and everybody who's not trans world damned is saved. And so if that's the case, it doesn't matter how much evil is in the world. It doesn't matter if Hitler exists and does the Holocaust. It doesn't matter, because God, these things are horrible, but they're for finite periods of time. And God has the best eternal end game in mind when he chooses the world. And so, that's why God would let these horrible things happen, especially by people who are not even saved. Now, if somebody wants to talk about, is hell just, maybe that's a spin-off question from that, and we can get into that. But I've answered this question that Jeff asked. It's already on our website, so go to freethinkingministries.com, and I think the name of the article is "Why Would God Create the Damned?" Why would God create people who weren't saved? Something like that, years ago that I wrote it. So I know I've got two articles, one on how to handle hell, one on how to handle those who've never heard the gospel as well. Anyway, spend some time on our website. If you didn't find this answer sufficient, I go into much more depth and detail there.
Okay. I'd add two things. One is our friend Dr. Joshua Ferris would be very mad at you for being a tradition.
Hey, I said I lean. I'm open to creationism, but I lean. I kind of like that.
Yeah. We'll see. I'm sure we'll have an email. I'm just kidding. And then the second thing I would say is how I would answer this question, even though you're not the one I'm not the one you're asking, is I think it's the wrong question. The better question from somebody who has this question is, why would God have created a world where Adam and Eve would have freely chosen to sin at all? I think that's a better question, but I think then Tim's responses would still suffice in those responses. But the reason I think it's a better question is because I think the idea is, well, God could create a world where everyone freely chooses Jesus. Well, then why wouldn't God just create a world where everyone doesn't need to freely choose to choose Jesus, but would always freely choose to do the right thing and not sin, right?
Yeah,
and so we get into feasible worlds here rather than freedom permitting possible worlds, and so that. Again, I'm not to belabor the point, but to me, I think that's a much more interesting question. It's like, well, why create when Adam and Eve? Couldn't you have created? Isn't there a feasible world where you created where Adam and Eve freely didn't choose to sin? But we're not answering that question right now.
Well, I will. God knows. God is in a position to know if that's true or not. We aren't, but the God of middle knowledge is. And it could be the case that if God created a world in where Adam and Eve didn't sin, then Adam and Eve's great grandkids would have done far worse. And imagine
then you get into atonement issues.
Atonement issues. You also get into that could be a world where I say that I believe that God created the one feasible freedom permitting world in which evil is ultimately defeated and everybody who is trans world damned is saved. It could be the case that, and God would know this with certainty or not, given his middle knowledge, that if God creates the world and where Adam and Eve didn't sin, but their great grandkids did, that's not the best feasible freedom permitting end game. And so then God would not create that world. If he's perfectly wise, intelligent, good, and loving, he would not create that world, even though he had the power to do it.
That's good. All right. Next up, This is from Cheryl, and actually, this comes with a video. So Cheryl says, my daughter is all into, quote unquote, this giving us stuff like this, and I'll show the video in a little bit. We are daily inundated with her constant rants, very wearing. Have you covered this? I know it has been some time since Rhett and Link left Jesus. I don't want to lose my grandsons to this stuff. So Cheryl has her daughter who has been railing against, I think, against Christianity, maybe against belief in God because of this stuff. So I'm going to open, I'm going to share the screen here. And I want to say, first of all, Tim and I were going to cover this, and then time just got away from us. So we were actually going to review this video, but this is the exact timestamps she sent. So
yeah, I'll just say I have notes that I typed out of this and different things I wanted to respond to. I didn't know you were going to bring this up, Josh, today, but I do have some notes I could go access. I haven't looked at it for several weeks now.
Yeah.
Well, this is Cheryl. I could send her my notes. Yeah, have Cheryl contact us, and I'll send you my notes if you want them.
Yeah, and then if we can edit this in too, if we want to grab our notes, but we always like to do the blind reaction for Tim. So if we want to edit in the notes, we can do that. So this is the timestamp that she sent, and we're gonna just respond to a little bit of it, not the whole thing. But here you go.
If you ask somebody to describe, they might say, well, it's about a relationship with Jesus. But if you're like, well, yeah, but what does that mean? These propositional statements come up. It's like, well, I believe this about Jesus. If any church worth its salt has a "we believe" place on their website, right? That's what I thought, right? And so I think that being certain and being right about these things comes at a premium. It is really, really important. So I thought that being certain was very important.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there.
So I would ask him to define certain. Do you mean 100% certainty, or do you mean we're gonna take a stand on this issue because the evidence is overwhelming, showing us that it's probably true? That's where I'd be. I am 98% certain that God exists, right? That's, some people watching me be like, only 98? I mean, for me, subjectively, that's huge, right? There's not very many things I can know with 100% certainty. I don't even know that I've got a body with 100% certainty. I could be in the matrix for all I know. I understand that that's a possibility. So the physical universe might not actually exist. That seems crazy. So I say, I know the physical universe exists. I'm 98% sure about that too. So, so here's the deal. Let's say I'm 98% sure that God exists. I'm 89% sure that the resurrection of Jesus is a historical event. To me, those are extremely high degrees of certainty, so high that I'm willing to live for it and die for it. I mean, if you ever, I say that those certainty levels are so high that I'm willing to die for it. And if you ever find somebody willing to die for something, you know they're willing to live for it. So, look, I believe that God exists and that God raised Jesus from the dead is a real historical event. The evidence is overwhelming for me. It's overwhelmed me. I can say that much, and I can't unsee it. So I'm willing to say, hey, Josh, if you believe that too, you and I can do work together, and that's why you're on the team, actually, because you and I both agree. We have our statement of faith that we're coming on and say, hey, we're going to do ministry together based on this because we believe it's true. I don't have to know it with 100% certainty, but we are confident that it's true because the degrees of certainty are very high.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I was going to say too, is the idea that you have to be certain also carries with it this idea that doubt or uncertainty is some sort of like an affront to God himself, which we don't find in Scripture. Questions are readily. In fact, Jesus seems to be most harsh on the most certain. The people who are certainly wrong and are wrong in their certainty. So certainty is not a virtue. Someone could be certain about something that is wrong. Hitler, we always bring up Hitler because he's an easy person to.
He's easy to pick on.
He's
and he deserves it.
Yeah, but Hitler was certain that Jews were the problem in society. So his certainty had nothing to do with whether or not his belief was true. So certainty doesn't actually. The question is, does the evidence show that the belief is true? And if it does, then I can have 90% certainty, 84% certainty. It doesn't have to be this blind faith certainty. It can be a reasonable faith. And that's why we always end by saying stay reasonable, right?
Stay reasonable. Yeah, we're never synced up on that, but that's what we're trying to do.
All right, last two questions. All right, Sarah says, I'm curious what study Bible you use. This is similar to the other question. I found Molinism after such searching. I also recently discovered the LSB Bible translation. Previously, I was a fan of the NASB, but loved the addition of the name of God, Yahweh. Apparently, LSB names Yahweh. I don't know that one. All that to say, there are a lot of study Bibles out there and lots of preachers on both sides of the aisle. So, is there a study Bible that aligns with Molinism? Do you just skip over some things?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear some thoughts and suggestions, as I really appreciate a good study Bible. Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Second study Bible question.
Yeah. Really, what I do is I tell people what study Bibles not to get. I don't recommend the MacArthur study Bible. I know a lot of, when I was a youth pastor, there was kids in the front row holding it. And I used to be a Calvinist preaching pastor, so I get it. And I think he gets a lot of things right, but he gets enough things wrong that I can't recommend a study Bible. Let's see. I don't recommend the Mormon study Bible or the Jehovah's Witness study Bible. Stay away from those.
Wouldn't be good. Yeah. No, or the Passion Translation. Yeah, don't do that one either.
No, I really do enjoy my ESV study Bible. I also like the HCSB study Bible. I have that.
Yeah,
and I go to that one quite often. That's I like to describe it this way. They try to translate word for word as much as possible until it starts getting hard to translate word for word, and then it'll go thought for thought as quickly as possible, or for as short a time as possible. And then as soon as they can, they go back to word for word. That's how I understand it. That's how it was explained to me. It seems like it's like it flows when you read it. I like it a lot. I also have the HCSB Apologetics Study Bible, and I highly recommend that one because you will have, I know that William Lane Craig writes an article in there about Molinism, and then you'll have somebody else write an article in there from how to interpret these passages from a Calvinist point of view. So at least you'll get differing ways to understand certain passages. But that, I do highly recommend that HCSB Apologetic Study Bible. They have a student version and just a regular version, which I've gotten both. When I was a youth pastor, I had tons of the Apologetics Study Bible for students that I would hand out for gifts, and I've got a lot of them left over. Or I have at least some of them left over, not a lot.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's
I would echo all of those things. I use the NET has a good notes Bible. Love that one. It's got a lot of translation notes and stuff in it too. But I just say one thing. If you read a study Bible, I think one of the biggest mistakes people make when they read study Bibles is that they tend to read the notes in the study Bibles as if they're scripture.
Right.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
Yes, there's stuff that you can disagree with in the study Bible notes. In all study Bible notes, you can be like, I don't buy that. Like, I don't buy that explanation. Now, you need to have good reasons to, some people have put in a lot of thought and effort to write those things. So it's not like they're just saying their interpretation, but you don't have to agree with the study Bible notes all the time, although they can be helpful. So that's the last thing I would say.
Yep.
All right. Before we do our last question, I want to once again ask you to like this video, share it. If anybody has questions, share it so they can see the questions that we answer and laugh at us as we answer them. So do that. Make sure you hit the notification bell so you don't miss a podcast, and find us on Spotify and other places as well. Okay, there is a last question, and this one's an interesting question because it's not really a question. It's just an angry person. So, so first, I'm going to share my screen again. And this person watched our short on the Jordan Peter. Watch the short that I produced. So for those people who don't watch, Tim has literally nothing to do with the shorts that are produced. I choose them and I produce them. Okay.
I'm always surprised. I'm like, what's coming? I seriously, I don't know what you're putting out.
So like, if you're upset at a short like this person is, don't get mad at Tim. Get mad at me, okay? All right. So he says, why did you shorten this video and remove the comments, Tim? And so let me share. Can we see it here? Okay. Yes. All right. So this is the short.
All knowing God, then free will is impossible. With your free will into the mix.
Well, that was the answer to your question.
Yeah.
He said, why wouldn't God?
He said, if God is omniscient, free will is impossible. Tell me you're not a philosopher without telling me you're not a philosopher.
Okay, I'm not going to play the whole thing, but that was the video. And he says that we deleted comments. So Tim, given the fact that I just said you actually don't know what shorts are being released, did you delete comments from that YouTube video?
I didn't even watch that video.
So
I didn't even watch that short.
I spent a lot of effort in making that short.
You put a lot out there. I don't even know what's going on. Like I said, when I do see them, I'm always surprised. But you don't let me know. You just
no. I publish. I'm like,
I asked Josh, do this part of the ministry for us, and I'm hands off. I'm not micromanager. Just let you run with it, and whatever. I see what you're doing out there, and I'm always happy with it. But no, I did not delete any comments. The only comments I've ever deleted on any video that I've seen are the people are like horrible language and cussing and things like that, being very inappropriate. So, but that was not on this video. Like I said, I haven't seen the video or any comments. So there were comments and then they were gone. Is that what this guy's saying?
That's what he's saying. It's news to me too, and I kind of moderate the thing. So, and I've never actually deleted. I think I've deleted one comment, and that's because it was just a tirade of expletives. And then it says, then he goes on to say, "Why don't you like being challenged?" ? Not sure why you and Josh support and hold him, Peterson, in such high regard. Peterson bombed, and then he shares a link to a Wretched video talking about Peterson's appearance on Wretched. So this is what I have to say to Jones, okay? Tim has answered your question. Here's what I have to say. I tried to respond to your contact us in your email, but it was blocked. I couldn't respond to it. So why are you deleting comments and responses?
Does he not like being challenged?
Yeah. So we don't delete comments, generally speaking. Again, only if they're harassing or just incredibly inappropriate. And the reason we shortened that video, I'm just going to, is because it's a short. That's why. It's a YouTube short. And so you shorten the video. And then guess what? If you click on the little link at the bottom, it's a link to the entire 2-hour live stream we did addressing Jordan Peterson on that. So I thought that would be a fun one to end on.
Well said, Josh. Well said.
There you go. All right. So anyway, if you want to reach us, you can send us snarky comments as well. I'll try to, usually we don't talk about those. I'll just respond and be like, hey, this is what happened. But since the email was kicked back, I thought, you know what? We'll just put Jones on blast. So Jones, if you see this, you can challenge us again. We'd love to be challenged. Actually, we'd like to be challenged. Most of what we do here is responding to being challenged in a lot of ways. So I don't understand that criticism. All right. So all of that to say, that was the 13 questions. Thank you, Tim, for responding. Thank you guys for watching. Like, share, subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell. And as we always say here at FreeThinking Ministries,
stay reasonable.